right.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dance to the Music. Thank you for watching and listening. Today's guest is Mickey Perez, or did I pronounce it correctly?
You did.
I did? Okay.
Yes.
I wasn't sure. I heard different versions, so I just wanted to make sure I pronounce it correctly. Is it DJ Mickey Perez, or is it just Mickey Perez?
I think at this point it's just Mickey Perez. It was DJ Mickey Perez, but I don't know. I don't mind either one, but I think these days just my name is cool.
Cool. How you feeling?
Good. It's cold here, but what else should I expect in New York in late December?
No, I'm cold down here. But
I know. I got my hand in my pocket. The space heater's pointed right at me. I'm appreciative.
You good? I hope you're not gonna be. Tell me if you're freezing, okay?
No, I'm good.
Thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
To come in here, of course. So I've done a little dig. I didn't find much. There's a few interviews out there, but I know obviously you're born in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I say, you correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're born in Chicago. You moved to Miami at some point, and then been now in New York City for a long minute.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Tell me. You don't have to give me the whole biography spiel, but tell me a little bit about the early Chicago days. We're similar in age, so I know it's like 80s, early 80s, like little kid, and then. You moved to Miami in what, middle school? Like, I feel like very formative years, right? Like your childhood, then it's your teenage years, and then your early adulthood in New York. So I just want to get a little sense of like how these different places influenced you into then eventually moving to New York City.
Totally. I was born in Chicago in '78. So I'm like 80s baby, and I lived there till 1990. We moved in the summer of 1990 to Miami. And Chicago, like my parents, it was very much a family-oriented upbringing where I was like with my grandparents, my parents, etc. And sports was very big in our household, specifically baseball, and then later like American football and basketball. And in Chicago in general, it's like a passion of the city as much as like music. It's a part of the cultural fabric of the city as much as like music is or art. And during that era, Michael Jordan, I think when I was 6 years old, was like a rookie. And there was he was like considered the best football player at the time. Walter Payton was with the Chicago Bears. And seeing these athletes, like especially Payton, when I started to have a little memory, not to get long-winded about it, but when I was like in my 5, 6 years old, starting to have memories, Payton was already this established player, but Michael Jordan was coming in as a rookie, and the Bulls were like, no one in Chicago messed with the Bulls. So to see how he took the Bulls and brought it up was, Chicago had a very much blue collar mentality, and those two players personified that. And being around my parents, and they worked all the time. Like my mom had a couple jobs, like the whole time I can remember, and my dad worked from like sunrise to sunset. And so it's like, all that blue collar kind of mentality is what I took with me to Miami. And in Miami, it's like, it was very much like a Latin city. I felt like I was moving to a city that was like my parents' house, different countries, Latin America and the Caribbean, etc. But what I felt I was bringing down there was this kind of like blue collar kind of work ethic, because I still played sports. Like when I got to Miami, I was like playing basketball and baseball. And I was like, my favorite teams were the Chicago teams, obviously, but my friends in Miami were like, you've been in Miami, you should be supporting the Miami teams. I'm like, hell no. Like, why? Like, I play like a Chicago player. So like that house music was something that I remember one time hearing, like my last year in Chicago, where they asked like the coolest kid in my class, like what kind of music, what was his favorite kind of music? And he said house music. And and I was like, what is house music? I didn't even ask, but I just heard it, And I'm like, oh, okay. And then maybe like a year later, I start hearing the term in Miami, And Miami, what I loved about Miami, I think what I brought that here is that when I started getting into like, like you come into your own, you start wanting to listen to your own music. And Miami had like bass music. It had Latin music. It had this like Latin house kind of flavor to it. It was like hip hop. I remember hearing on the Power 96 here in the same radio station, like Cypress Hill. Then I'd hear like a DJ Laz, like house cut. Then I'd hear like some 2 Live Crew, all that would be in like a half hour on top of like ballads and stuff. So it was like getting open to this whole different world of music on top of, having like the Latin music at home. And the culture itself of like Latin culture, I think was something that when I moved to New York, I was trying to kind of connect in a way with the Latin community here, which was different than the Latin community. Very different. You know, it's like Cuban at the time in the late 90s was like Cuban, predominantly a lot of Cubans, diaspora there. And then later it's become Venezuelan. But in New York, it was predominantly like Puerto Rican and Dominican, which was cool because they spoke Spanish similar to the way Cubans spoke. So I like felt like being here. So yeah, I think that, you know, in a way, like the two cities definitely, I've been in New York almost twice as long as either city, but I think those two cities in each way kind of very much shaped the way I am. I still feel like in a way I kind of talk like I'm from Miami, you know? I talk
Really,
like a Miamier.
like, how so?
Because I still
Miamier.
Because I still open and close sentences with bro sometimes. It's not as much as, you know, I used to bro like crazy before I moved there, but definitely was broing a lot before and after sentence, finishing and opening and finishing sentences with bro, and sometimes speaking Spanglish in a way that, you know, you say certain words, start, you know, something in English and finish it in Spanish. That's a very Miami thing. Sometimes those things kind of come out accidentally.
Okay, it's interesting to know because obviously I'm not Latin. I'm not even from this country, but I would have not assumed that this is something particular to Miami because I feel like people in New York do that all the time, right? Like Spanglish, right?
Yeah.
To do the English and Spanish in one sentence and like whatnot. But interesting to learn. Interesting thing to learn.
Yeah, you kind of you notice it kind of accidentally coming here.
Yeah. Before I go to my next question, I wanted to just double or ask again in regards to your family, right? You talk about your mom and your dad, how they like very really hardworking, and how the whole family was into sports. And generally, like if it's a Latin family, you said your dad is from Cuba.
Yes.
Yeah, and your mom is from Ecuador. Like, was the music? I'm assuming, but I can also be very wrong, that music is like a very integral part of being in a Latin family or growing up in a family. And then also you just said Miami, right? Was the music part was always around, but just in different ways. You know how you said like you moved then to New York, and that was. The New York version is like salsa and was always around. But did you grow up like consciously like thinking about music? If that is even the best way to ask, I guess, you know.
Not as a child. You know, like I was growing up hearing my parents would play like Benny Moré, which is like a very classic kind of 1940s 50s Cuban singer. So they like the traditional old school Cuban music, but then they also like Celia Cruz, which at the time was like coming out of Fania Records, but they might not have known Fania Records per se. But they were also, we were very much into Michael Jackson. Like I remember the 83 Motown reunion, like my pops recorded that like on Betamax, and I watched that religiously, you know? So in that way, like music was always like a part of it, but I don't think I think in honesty, by the time I got to Miami and me and my friends in high school, we were like really into like classic rock and hardcore and punk. And we met our other group of, who wound up being our other group of best friends. And they were hip hop heads. They were DJs, MCs, producers, breakdancers, writers. And they didn't know really much about rock. So we were kind of like, did this kind of cross-cultural kind of, they all Latin, by the way, like, you know, like maybe one Jamaican, like one kid from India, but everyone else was like from one part of the Latin diaspora or another, you know? And it was cool because they put us on to so much hip hop. And I think all the hip hop I knew was like MTV was giving me, or what, you know, local radio stations in Miami was giving me. But it was when they were putting me on to like, and giving me the context too, not just, this is Common, you know, like this is like, oh, this is Common, he's from Chicago and he's from this part of Chicago and whatever. They added all this context to it, so that I'm like, oh, is a rapper from Chicago doing this? And the lyrics were great, you know. And I think like once getting into hip hop, I think I started to seek a music that I kind of trying to seek more and more of whatever that was, because I really couldn't get enough of it, you know. I think that's really where I think it really kind of started the musical journey, at least.
Okay. I can relate to that. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people, not just our generation, I think in general, just they all started with like hip hop being the first. Yeah, I hate the word genres, but like the first direction of music that opens up so many different avenues and then makes you explore all the other ones that you might find interesting. You just said you obviously then moved to New York in, I don't know how old you were, early 20s, like right after.
Yeah. I moved in 2002.
Like
25, I think I moved.
It doesn't even, you don't have to be like very specific. I'm wondering more so like, did you right after school or after high school, you decided like, I'm going to go because
No, I was one of those kids growing up that I never liked leaving Miami at all. Like I was like, why everything's happening here? So I thought, and then I think at a certain point though, I was kind of seeing, there was something that I was seeing beyond the city, but I was like in community college after school. Like I wasn't like the best high school student. So community college was really the only way I could go to college initially. And then with that, I left to Florida State when I was like 20. And for Latin parents, it's very much like an emotional thing because they never expect their son, their first boy to leave, et cetera, et cetera. So that was like a big move. But then I wound up actually going to film school. And in Orlando after that, I wound up only spending a year at Florida State, and I went to film school in Orlando. And at the time, I thought that I was going to be a filmmaker. That's what I wanted to do.
Let's talk about that because I think you mentioned that in an interview that I saw, and I didn't mean to interrupt you there. But my question is, like you said, you wanted to be a filmmaker. Is that what made you move to or sparked a move to New York?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think the spark with New York kind of started happening when the Bulls and Knicks would play each other in those like hotly contested Eastern Conference final series in the early 90s because the fans were crazy, and then I would watch like MTV Raps or whatever, and a lot of it was based in New York, and you'd see all this different New York energy. And then I started getting into movies, and like I didn't really understand the film language, but I really, really liked the ways Martin Scorsese, for example, did movies about his community. The Italian community. And I liked how Spike Lee did movies about his community. And I'm sure within those communities, they probably have people that are in those communities probably have beefs, with the filmmakers and the way they portray certain characters, et cetera, et cetera. But we didn't, us in the Latin community, first generation born of, Latin descent, we didn't have that, like we might have like a movie here and there, like La Bamba, but, I feel like that's more for Mexican Americans to relate to, in a way. So we didn't really have that. And I felt like I wanted to, I don't know why I thought I need to be this person, but I was like, you know what? I feel like I could do this. I feel like I can tell this story of like, the diaspora here, what life is like in Miami at the time, because all the movies in Miami had nothing to do about Miami. So I wanted to tell like a proper movie about Miami, So then I went to film school and came back home for like about 8 months, and I wasn't doing anything, not doing a thing. And my mom, like just sleeping in and just like going out and just not really, I worked on like a independent film as an intern for like 3 weeks, but that was it in terms of production work. And because they were promising, this film school promised all this work in Miami, all this job placement, 97% job placement, all this shit. And yeah, and then one day I got in a car accident on my way to work, and it wasn't my fault. And that accident, the insurance money was, I thought, all right, I'm gonna get a car or whatever. My mom's like, you should take this money and go to LA or New York because you're not doing anything here, and go follow your career there. So I was like, kind of a chicken shit, like I wanted to, but I felt like years down the road I'll do it. But when she was like, do it, I was like, all right. And then like within 2 months I moved, and when I moved here, it was kind of to immerse myself without knowing a single thing about New York, really, but just to immerse myself in it and to walk around and just kind of learn the city. I thought I was going to move here for that on the 5-year plan,
5-year plan.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
The 5-year plan, 23 years later, but 5-year plan.
Well, there's a few points that you just made. I have follow-up questions, but to stick to my question right here, I just wondered then, because you were a filmmaker, or maybe you still are, maybe you eventually come back to it. How did you decide to then switch creative mediums, or like, was that a natural, or I should say like a conscious decision, or like I'm done with filmmaking and I'm gonna go over here where the music is, or like how did that transpire? Obviously like turning into DJing eventually?
Yeah, it wasn't something like overnight. It kind of happened over. It kind of happened over the entire. I moved to New York in '02, and I didn't start DJing till 2008. But I think the seeds were being planted from like maybe '04, '05 in some ways. I met two who would later become two of my closest friends in New York, and they were really into music, specifically one friend, Josh Maldonado, and he put me on to all this music I had never put on. I remember these were like the iPod days, and he had like a iPod with like so much music on it and a hard drive. And I remember we had like a hang in my apartment where we just exchanged each other's hard drives. And in the middle of it, he was putting me on to all these groups. Like, you heard of ESG? I'm like, no. It's like, oh, it's this group of sisters from the Bronx. He told me like South Bronx Story, all this stuff. And I'm like, what? And I would hear a couple songs. And he's like, yeah, they were part of this scene in New York and downtown. And I'm like, huh? And then like, well, here's Liquid. And so it's like all these those things kind of, I like the music. And when I would listen to it, I would immediately think, okay, how can I put this in a film? That was my thought listening to all this music, is like trying to find music that I haven't heard in scenes in films, because those were always my favorite scenes in movies, and that's kind of what got me into wanting to be a filmmaker, is to do these long shots, kind of choreographed to music. And the irony is like how I wound up getting into it, I think DJing was through that, because my friends would have these like hangs where they would listen to these rare records, and I never had I didn't have a record player or records to provide to share. So at one point, I had never, in my entire time in New York, I've never worked on a single film. So that's like, I think, a part of it too. It's like you think you're ready to come in from the bottom up and grind your way, intern, PA, whatever, but in film. But what winds up happening is you wind up working in anything production, as long as it's production. So it winds up being TV, crappy reality shows and game shows and things like that. And then like you get in, I wound up getting into advertising. Fortunately, I mean, I'm grateful to have worked in all those jobs, but it wasn't what I wanted to do, So the whole time I'm thinking, all right, well, the TV thing and the advertising thing, these are things that I'm going to add on to the movie, quote unquote, right, in my head. And when I was working like at this ad agency, it was the first time I actually made like decent money to be able to take up a hobby, So this is when I've decided, I'm like, I'm going to buy a turntable so I have records to present to my friends. And when I was at Guitar Center, the guy who sold me the turntable was like, do you want to buy a mixer or a preamp? And I'm like, well, what's the difference? I mean, I knew the mixer, but I'm like, what's the preamp? And I'm like, let me get the mixer. And I got like the M1, the Newmark M1, the $50, and I'm like, let me get it because just in case, And yeah, I started kind of playing records, learning to play records with iPods. That was the only other connection I had. Not mixing, obviously, just, learning it. And like late '07, early '08. And I lived in an apartment with two friends, and one was like kind of the mom of the house. And I was the last person to move in. So one was like the mom, and the other person was like kind of like, not I wouldn't say dad, but like an uncle. So I remember him telling me like she was leaving out of the country for like a weekend to Costa Rica or something. And he was like, hey, Esmahan's out of town. We're having a party this Friday and you're DJing. I was like, what? Okay. And I remember I called out of work like Monday and Tuesday or Tuesday and Wednesday or something so I could practice like a set. And that was, the whole thing of doing something like that was very like not in my character. I don't normally put myself out there and try something. And on top of that, do it in public. To face the scrutiny. So I did it with a couple friends of mine. And I remember like we had two turntables set up and the mixer on the left. I guess the wiring was like short. So we had to do it like that. And it was a disaster, but but people enjoyed it, And I remember like seeing an old friend of mine from Miami at that party. And she was like, so you DJ? And I'm like, yeah, it's hilarious. I don't even know either, But the whole bug it wasn't like, don't do that anymore. It was just like, all right, well, Esmahan's birthday's next month and she's going to have a party. So you got next month. So that whole next month I was like saving, kind of what could I do, this, that, the other. And I think like that next party, her house party at her apartment, that was where it really kind of all came together because people really were enjoying themselves. And I know they didn't know that music. It was like Boogaloo and like Fania stuff with like LCD sound system, James White and the Blacks. It was, kind of a hot mess, but people were really feeling it. It was a house party. And I think at that point, I'm like, keep doing this. But obviously I had the job. And in my head, I'm like, this is cool to do as long as it has nothing to do with work. You know, like everything I was doing with film, my whole quote unquote film dream was completely compromised in a way. Like I'm like working in advertising, you know, like I'm not at all doing films, you know. I did create something with my friends, like a short film, you know, but nothing that I felt like was, you know, fulfilling creatively. So that doing that, the DJing, the house parties initially, that was what fulfilled the creativity. And I think that is where I thought maybe I should just continue doing this, because in some ways the telling of the story part was very similar to filmmaking, you know?
Okay, understood. So within you, when at some point did you then decide to leave advertising and, I don't know, maybe there was a different job in between, but like go full-time DJing, because that's not a easy thing to do in this town. And also, like, when people ask you who are non-music people, right? And you tell them, you know, you're like, hey, what do you do? And you're like, I'm a DJ. And then usually the next question is like, oh, what kind of music do you play? What is your answer?
When they ask me what kind of music I play, I basically say I play a bunch of different rhythms of dance music from Africa, the Caribbean, Central and South America, and the United States. I try to just keep it as general as that. You say Latin, people's thought of Latin can go straight to salsa. And there's, you know, and you say house and people's thought might just be 4 on the floor, you know, and like just that one kind of house beat, and not like, you say a particular, you know, to me, that's the fastest way to say it, I feel like. And it encompasses what I actually play.
Yeah, very well. And the way you answered it, I don't know, it would tell me like you said that a bunch of times, plenty of times before, to actually come to exactly this description and to like make it as precise as possible within like one sentence, you know, and for people to understand also.
Yeah. I think like at best it's like a fusion of like dance music from those regions, you know, and trying to really show that there's a through line, there's a connectedness through all of it. It's not like one is so different than the other. I think all kind of draw from one and the other. Like, is this, you know, I mean, this is maybe something we could talk about later, but there's a lot of like Afro-Cuban inspiration in house music, even in the early days, you know. Same thing with like African music, and vice versa. There's a lot of like Black American influence in Afro-Cuban music, and Brazilian music. But anyway,
absolutely.
That's kind of why I feel like it's not just to say you play this out, but it's also like this is you know, a lot of different people from New York are here, and a lot of people, and a lot of them come from a lot of different areas. But when they hear something from their region, they feel like seen in a lot of ways. You know, like I know when I hear like Theo Perez play an Eddie Palmieri joint, 11 minutes of Adoración, you know, I'm not Puerto Rican, but I'm like, I know that that's Afro-Cuban. There's Afro-Cuban elements in there, and I'm like dope. And he unapologetically plays it beginning to end. You know, it's inspiring in a lot of ways. Excuse me. Yeah. That I think is the most beautiful thing with DJing.
To present and to, number one, present your heritage and like being able to express that in that way, but then also to hear different, I guess, what's the word I want to use? Not songs, different elements from different parts of the world, and then, or like the Latin diaspora, to then present it to other people. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think it's as much like, for example, like my dad is Cuban, my mom is Ecuadorian, but my dad is from the Caribbean and my mom is from South America. I'm from Chicago, and I also grew up in Miami. Those are like 4 regions right there. And then New York, which is where I ultimately at. So it's like I need to understand the history of New York, not just Latin history New York, the Black history New York, the history New York, that of Chicago, of Miami, of Cuba, of the Caribbean, of Ecuador, of South America, and put that all together and understand the connection to Africa. And I think the beauty is trying to put that all together, and it's constantly evolving. So how it might have sounded 2-3 years ago is much different than how it sounds now, because you're, you know, as a human, you're evolving too. So it's only natural that your craft is going to evolve with it, especially if you're like doing, you know, your 10,000 hours and getting your work done. I think that, yeah, at least for me, that was what drew me to it, because with filmmaking, I wanted to tell a story that people could connect to, specifically, you know, people that are along the same lines as me, you know, the Latin diaspora, for example. But I wanted to tell stories with characters from other regions too, that people can, from those places, can relate to, you know? I'll be like, oh yeah, I have like a group of Latin friends and they're definitely like that, you know? That kind of relatability, I think, is something that connected me to going out when I was just like a patron and I didn't know anything about this, you know?
Gotcha.
Yeah, like I definitely was like drawn to those DJs and those musicians and those bands very much.
When you in that time, like early 2000s, I'm just curious, I didn't write this down, but I'm just curious, early mid 2000s maybe, what were some of your places that you went out to? Just, you know, you had your turntables maybe at that point, but where did you go? Who did you go listen to, or like what places did you go to?
This is funny. Okay, so I didn't know much. I was basically just trying to discover as much as possible, and I lived in Brooklyn, but the city was still like the driving force of like culture. You know, Williamsburg was just starting really around that time. But so I remember going to the city, and I remember going to see Antibalas for the first time in like 2003 at SOBs, and that show changed my DNA, you know. And I already loved Afrobeat through Fela, having visited New York in 2001. Shout out to Halcyon when it was on Smith Street, because I got 2 Fela CDs there and this Boogaloo CD, and that was my introduction to Afrobeat and Boogaloo, you know, at Halcyon. So like SOBs, right? But then there was Southpaw in Park Slope. Southpaw was a spot. I remember seeing some great hip hop shows there, but then other great like soul music shows. I saw like a great I don't even know who. Wait, was the Do-Over there? Maybe I saw them and then
Southpaw?
Yeah,
possible.
I think
I don't know. They've at that point, I don't think I knew of the Do-Over. It came like for me like maybe late 2000s, but
okay.
It's very possible.
It was. I remember like a couple great hip hop parties. I just didn't know who the DJs were in the parties. I just would go, you know. There's another spot I'm blanking on. Like for a band that really put me onto, that I really loved, was a band that played on the street in the subways, Hypnotic Brass Ensemble.
Oh, word, yeah.
And then
on Union Square.
Yeah. Lit Lounge. I remember Lit Lounge, rest in peace, Lit Lounge, which was like a coke den basically, but they had great shows, especially downstairs. And I remember Hypnotic Brass Ensemble played with Mos Def in like Lincoln Center, but the after party was at the basement at Lit Lounge, and Mos Def was there like playing with, or Yassine Bey was there with Hypnotic Brass Ensemble playing, and that was like a formative show. Also, like full admittance here, coming out, but I was totally into the hipster scene in like 04, 05, 06, because at the time,
what was the hipster scene back then?
it was this like I don't know, I don't even know how to say it.
He was wearing the beanie already back then?
No buckets.
Is that what you're saying?
The beanie I might have worn back then, but no, I actually had hair on the top of my head, so I could rock a mini fro. It was great. People would say I look like, me and my friends look like Mars Volta. But we would go to these parties that were like, I remember like there was this photographer named Merlin Bronx, and he would wear like a wig, right, of straight hair, and he would take photos of people just like they were doing these ill poses, and the next day it would be on this website called lastnightsparty.com or something like that. And people would take those photos and put them on their MySpace profile. That's how big this party got. I think it was called Misshapes, the party. So I would go there. Don Hills, I think they would do it. The Smiths Morrissey party on Sundays, I think that was at Don Hills, or another spot like in the West Village. I'm blanking on it.
Those names all sound familiar. Also the party name, I was like, oh, these are hipster parties. I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, hipster in the sense that was what it wound up later becoming categorized as, but the music was dope. I mean, I remember that's why we went, my friends and I, because you would hear like DFA stuff, but in the era of DFA coming out, like then you would also hear like new wave, post-punk, you know, those DJs that were playing, they really knew that their stuff, because they were playing stuff, and I love post-punk and new wave, and I didn't know really much of it, so it was just cool to go there and get put onto it. And the Smiths party was kind of the same thing. It wasn't just the Smiths and Morrissey. It was like all this, you know, other kind of new wave post-punk music that, even though I might not play it now, I feel like there's still elements of it. Like when I hear Ron Hardy, people talk about Ron Hardy and some of the songs he played a lot of like post-punk new wave stuff that I feel like kind of gets lost now in house music, you know? And in a lot of house music DJs I hear play, I feel like I don't hear new wave and post-punk the way I think like least Ron Hardy in a lot of recordings would incorporate it, you know? And I thought that was cool because I'm like, oh, okay, you can incorporate some rock kind of vibe to it. And it was still dance music. And at the end of the day, it makes sense. It's dance music, you know? Yeah, so like those early places were definitely at Galapagos and like Williamsburg was definitely 285 Kent. Another one that was down there, blanking. It's like on Kent. There was like another place, Glasslands.
Oh yeah, that was it next door to? Doesn't really matter, but because I think I read that it's closing now. The music hall, the Williamsburg Hall of Music, is that what it's called?
Music Hall of
yeah,
Williamsburg.
yeah, it's closing. And that was next. It's next, or Glasslands was next to that. I think.
It
right?
was like,
or was it Galapagos that was next to it?
Galapagos was a little closer. Yeah.
Tell me in the comments, whoever knows all the things. But it was all in Williamsburg at that. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and it was, you know, you would go out there. It'd be many different places to go to around besides those places. I remember Zebulon was like a very dope place to watch live music from many different regions. You had bands kind of on the come up, or bands that had great projects that were doing their side projects there, and just the crowd that would come out. It was like two French brothers that owned it, and the crowds that would come out be very eclectic. The music would be like African one week to like something from like Morocco the next, to something, you know, Latin, to just something folky or free jazz. It was just really eclectic, and they had DJs.
What was the name of that place?
Zebulon.
Zebulon.
It was on. It was on Wythe, I want to say, and between Metropolitan and North Third.
Okay.
Yeah. Now it's like a diner or something.
Diner?
Same as it ever was.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the word what is it, relatability, and something that I can relate to is the fact that I moved to New York in 2004, so a couple of years later. We both are not from here, and we lived here. That term, where you said you lived here longer than all the other places that you lived, obviously, same for me. I don't count like the first, 5 years or whatever, because you don't really live. You grow up in your mom's living room.
Yeah, totally.
And to put it frankly. But I wanted to ask you, having all these different parts, Chicago, Miami, and now New York, you already spoke about it, but then you live here for so long, so much to the sense that this is the place that socialized, that you kind of became socialized, and you learn about yourself, you learn about other people, you kind of grow up, so to speak, even though you come here as an adult. I wonder how you feel about the place that you become an adult, that you become who you are, and now that place is obviously ever changing, but now it's changed completely. And I wanted to ask you how that affects your creative being into, like, you just talked about all these places that influenced you, that you went to listen to music, the places that you bought music, right? So if those places don't exist anymore or change, like, how do you navigate that into, like, okay, I've became this person, I present this creative side of me in DJing or all your creative endeavors, but now all these things change and are not the same anymore. How do you translate that into your, creative side of things? Not just like, I change as a person, yes, we all do, hopefully, into, your DJing, and to make it consistent and still be able to do what you do. I hope that question made sense.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. I think, to me, it's like a couple things. Like, one, I try to always think about, what if someone's moving to the city for this is like their year in, and they don't know where they're going out, and they happen to be somewhere where I'm playing, And I feel like the person that moves to New York, for the most part, today is really no different than the person that moved to New York and when we moved, or 20 years before that. They're searching for something, they're searching for something different, new. They're in New York, like, if you weren't born and raised in New York, you moved to the city with an intention. You might not have known it specifically what it was, or you might have, but you're in the search for something, I feel like, different, to get put onto something different. I know I was. And I think when I think about now and that, I think about there's still people coming here hungry to find things about like what New York. I'm sure that they, and wherever they come from, have heard and read about New York City in a particular way and view it in their imagination in a particular way. And I try to think about that, of how I was, and think about, man, those musicians and those people that presented, filmmakers and artists that presented their works and how I took it. I think like now in the ways like I'm on the other side of that. And it's cool because I think now I can present with a little experience something to that person that's new to the city or whatever. And in contrast to someone that's been here for a long time or born and raised here, I feel like sometimes, I think that's like a part of life, really. It's like we get up there and, you have losses, you lose friends, family, and things change. And it is sad to a degree to see like, oh, well, that's not there anymore. This isn't what it was like it was back then. But, in every era that's ever existed, especially in New York City, it's always been over, like if you moved here, and I remember when I was like in 2010, everyone was like, oh man, you should have been here before 9/11. But then I remember people in the 90s talking about, oh man, you should have been here in the 70s and 80s. People in the 70s, oh man, when it was really dope? The 60s. And then people in the 60s like, when it was dope? In the 40s when bebop was happening. So, and I feel like people 25 years from now are gonna be like, when it was dope? Post-pandemic in the 20s. It's just because I feel like how we are as a society, as a people, generally speaking, that we never tend to see how great things are amidst all the BS, Because like, think about where house music and hip hop started. I mean, the city was in shambles during that time, So it's like we could say now, like the city's in shambles now. And it's up to us to kind of make sense of that through the music, as much as the music that's coming out now with the music that's been coming out. I think those two approaches, I think about that a lot, because I love New York. New York has given me so much, and I owe the city so much. The people in the city, that made me feel welcome, that took me in, and I feel like I owe that now to people that are coming in, especially if they're like, where's this from, or what's this record? It's like, I'm one of those people that tells them, because people told me, people told me.
If you're honestly asking, why not tell them? Yeah,
and it's one thing, I understand why people don't put on the, tell other people their records or whatever. But, at the end of the day, they still got to work that record in right and make it sound good if they're going to go that far, So, let's see. Hopefully they do. But that's why I think it's important to share that kind of music, because you don't know what it might put them onto. And 5 to 10 years from now, they'll be like, I went here, and I heard this and this. The world is funny like that, I think. The world is very, very funny like that. Just a small aside. This homie, Jim, right? He's a DJ. He also does sound gear. He's like a carpenter. He builds all his own things, and he builds these amazing turntable stabilizers, right? And I guess through public service, I think I was telling him, not even through public service, I was playing somewhere else, and I was telling him about these issues. And I'm like, man, they still had the tape with the rubber bands on the turntable. He's like, oh my God, I'm going to give you these stabilizers or whatever. Just use them and let me know what you think. I'm like, okay. I use them and I'm like, these are the best. I want a pair of these. I'm going to tell every place. I told the place that I played, they want me to get your email, this, that, the other. He's like, all right, yeah, cool. And I kept asking him, tell me how much they are. I want to pay you for them. He never ever told me a price, right? But that's not the gist of the story. Last Friday, I was out playing, and he happened to be there. And as it just so happens, I guess, like, Dope Jams bought a pair, and I guess they wound up getting in touch with him. And I hope he doesn't mind me telling the story, but I thought it was really dope and full circle how something dope happens when you do something sincere with love, how things like that can happen. Basically, Dope Jams reached out to him and wanted him to do a pair for them, and they're like collaborating on that. And he was just telling me, he's like, yo, it's crazy because if I didn't put you into, like, you made that happen, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't make shit happen, but it's still beautiful that, that's, and I feel like so much of life is that, those things. I don't know what you call that, but I think a lot of life is that. And so, like, putting yourself in the right situations, and by, I think, being sincere in what you do, like, it might take long, but I think at the end of the day, no one can take it away from you,
like genuine intentions,
yeah.
I guess, and connections, then obviously might be a word for it. But I totally understand what you're saying.
Totally.
To follow up on that, I don't know if you if you want to or if you can't answer that. I feel like after so many years of DJing, right? And when I see there's so many avenues of DJing, you're like one of the most hardworking DJs in the city. Like your name is everywhere. You play a lot. As also you don't have a day job anymore. You used to. So I say all that to ask, like, after so many years and after what you just explained, what the city does still for you and what you owe to the city, how do you stay true to your, as people say, your why? Why do you do the thing you do?
I just literally, honestly, I think about how my parents struggled for me, you know? I try to go to Cuba at least like once a year, to see like where my dad came out of, my grandfather, my grandmother, that to see like, why would you ever leave Cuba, you know, because you got to grind. And like the fact that they did that, it's funny because I see like memes as like, you know, my parents struggled and left all this, migrated to this country just so I could be a DJ. But you know, that's my form of expression. And I feel like I owe them that, their sacrifices, you know. I feel like I would be doing a disservice to their sacrifices if I didn't put everything I could into it. And I think that at the end of the day is, I think, what keeps me going, you know, to do it, to like keeps me in love with it. That and the music, quite frankly. I mean, you know, I don't know if I got bored with it. That was one promise I made to myself when I was like, all right, I'm going to try and do this, was that if you have to play music you don't like, or if you're bored or you reach like you've hit a plateau, stop. Just go back into the other thing. Do not do with this what you did with film, which is going to production, because I don't want to work at like Sony. I don't want to have any kind of job. Like, I'm cool with this, you know? And yeah, I think that, yeah, I really think about not only them, my parents, but also like so many musicians and struggled, you know, and DJs too. You know, a lot of great DJs don't get on. And you know, and it's with that in mind that it's like, if you don't put your best in, there's 50 DJs waiting to replace you. And that's real, you know, and they're all dope. And they got a story to tell too, from where they come from and their roots. So it's like, you know, and I respect that level of competition in the sense of like, you're not trying to be better than them, but you got to put your best foot forward because you're replaceable, you know, in a way, you know, to, you know, if it's a specific party that likes your sound, maybe not. But generally speaking, this is a privilege to be able to do. And I think the moment you kind of feel like I deserve this and all that stuff, is kind of loses that, you know, but it's under, you know, as a human being though, it's natural to feel frustrated when you've been putting your work in and sometimes you're not feeling like you're reaping the rewards of the work you put in, you know? So it's like, I think at a certain point, I tried to find the balance of that, because I know that part of my personality can go the other way and be like, man, this place and that place and this, you know, and then at the end of the day, it's like, well, you know what? Just practice more, keep hone the sound, you know, hone the sound, keep honing it is what I just keep telling myself, you know? And I think also, sorry, the one thing I was going to say is that like, I've thought about like other jobs at a certain point, like what am I going to take from DJing? And I don't know, like maybe something else will come along. Like I could, you know, be a music supervisor on a film or something. I don't know.
I was just thinking about that earlier.
Maybe, you know, who knows? But I'm cool with, maybe as long as my knees and my back allow, like being one of these cats that plays till like their 60s and 70s, you know, or 80s. Because in Cuba, all these musicians are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s playing, you know, and I feel like that's half of what keeps them alive, you know, is the want, you know. Yeah.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I was just talking to Terry about ageism earlier. I feel like, especially in the dance music space, right? There's a lot of ageism.
Very much so.
That's a word, yeah, happening. So, but then, like you said, when we look at musicians, then if they make it that far, right? Then you have something to say. You always have something to say, but then you're actually like, nah, that person has been playing for 50, 60 years, you know, if they started when they were young. So
absolutely,
they definitely have something to say. I feel like we should make sure that we also bring that into, like, make it, I don't know, make it seem normal to be a little bit older in the creative field, like, you know, especially in DJ world and the music world?
Totally. I think, yeah, there's very much always been that skewed thing where people in their 20s, I mean, in the pop sense, in the popular sense, not pop genre, it makes sense how everything is geared towards, say, 18 to 30. 25, you know, but I do think that if you, I mean, you just look, it's just natural that the more life you live, the more of a story you're going to tell, and the more what you do in your craft is going to evolve. And I think there's places for that, and I think there's places for the other, and I think there's places where the two can mix. And I think when it tends to be one or the other is where the shit gets fucked up. You know,
yeah.
And so I do think, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, really, if you're an athlete, excuse me, split flying and shit. If you're an athlete, you know, you're old by 36. That's crazy, you know. But if you're a DJ at 36, you know, like, you could be really kind of coming into your own, you know. That's the way I look at it, because I feel like every year that if you're doing your thing properly, every year you should be way better than you are the year before, you know, like adding things to your game, you know, like an athlete, you know, like add things to your game so that no one can say you can't do this, you can't do that, you know, like, yeah, I think as long as you continue to improve and you kind of stay in touch with what's happening socially in your city, in your community, in the world, you know, I think that there's a place, you know, I definitely do.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about we've talked about this before, but that part of like DJing, producing, producer DJing, right? But before I get into that, I wanted to bring it up because to compare DJing to, like, if you make music, right, in no matter what intention, what genre, right, you make music, at the end of the day, you have a product, you have something that you can market and that you can sell, right? So you always have something that, I finish that, I'm with this, then I work on the next, I finish that, right? With it's very, very like frank, I put this, I guess, but with DJing, we're in the service industry, right? You just like, you're selling, you're marketing yourself and your sound, and the music you play, but at the end of the day, you play for other people, you play at venues, it's you and your records, right? You don't necessarily sell something to other people. I'm wondering how you define success in that way of not being the producer, right? And we can get into that whole conversation after, but I'm just wondering, and you just said, like, you see yourself as somebody who keeps playing until their 60s and 70s, but are there certain, like, goals that you set for yourself other than, I want to be better every year?
I think, oh man, how can I say it? For me, when I started playing, or let me say it like this. When I got into filmmaking and wanting to make movies, I always thought, like, all right, I'm going to make a film. I'm going to spend 5 years working on that film, conceiving the script, writing the script, casting, the whole shebang, 4 or 5 years, whatever. And then I'm going to take like 2 years off and then work on the next film. So I have like all this time off, and then I'll like hunker down and work, you know? And the production life itself of 80-hour work weeks was, to me, you know, nuts. But I was like, all right, well, this is the work. This is the nature of the work, and fine, you got to do it. This is a part of it. If you don't want to do this, don't do this. And what DJing, and besides the medium, I think just the playing every night kind of thing, one night, one gig, what that felt a lot like was how like baseball players approach playing baseball. They play 162 baseball games a year, you know, and they're taught from Little League by their parents to never take a game too poorly, never take a bad game to heart, and never take a good game too high, you know, don't be too hyped on a good game because you get humbled. And I think with, you know, you make a film, you spend 5 years working on this film, and then you present it to the world, and people are like, whatever, you know? And that's literally 5 years of your life you just spent into that, you know? And with respect to those artists to do that, that's not easy, you know? You lose a little bit of yourself after that, you know? And then it's like, all right, now you got to pick yourself up and do that again another project, you know, from the bottom of your soul, if you're doing it right, you know? And with DJing, it's like you do that one night and people feel it or they don't. And either way, it's like, all right, well, I'll have another opportunity Wednesday or Saturday or whatever, you know? And what can I take from this and do better? Or this really worked, but I'm, you know, and I think like that part of it, I really took to. I really took to. And I think that I didn't, with regards to like producing or putting something out and presenting something, I think maybe I have PTSD from like editing, but a part of me is like I don't want to be in front of a laptop, you know, like for hours on end working on like a song or two. And the next thing I know, like by the time I'm ready to put out, I don't even want to hear it, you know, like that's my worry with, that's why I've never wanted to kind of get into it. And also I genuinely like just playing records, other people's music, you know? I think once you start making your own music, you almost feel like you have to play it.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely based on what I've heard other people, you know, who are producing music that have told me like, oh yeah, they booked me because they want to hear my music. It's definitely an aspect to it for sure. I did want to talk to you about it because I know, like, I see you as a rarity, almost like a DJ that only plays record, right? Like just DJs. Like I feel like a lot of folks are then made to believe, like, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong that you want to make music, that you want to produce, like that everybody can do whatever they want. But I'm more talking more so, and I don't know. I feel like that's more so in dance music, as a dance music genre. There's this weird underlying, maybe unspoken pressure of like, you're a DJ, oh, do you produce music? Like, even maybe from venues, like, what can we promote you with? Because, you know, you have this record out. So
right.
I wanted, you know, not just, you just explain, like, you don't want to sit at the computer for that long, but how else do you feel about, like, have you ever felt like outside pressure to feel like, oh, I have to produce music because everybody else is producing music and I'm not, like, what, you know?
Yeah, I don't think it's hard not to if you're really trying to like make a real go of this, you know? Like you start seeing the thing is like you can't, it's not good to, and it's not healthy to play the comparison game, but you kind of can't help it sometimes when you see someone after a couple of years getting opportunities that you, after like all this time, haven't gotten. So it's like, and naturally you got to go to the drawing board and be like, what am I not doing to get those opportunities, you know? So it'd be stupid to not be like, no, I cannot think about produce, you know? Like I've had to think about it. I've had to think about it legit, you know? And, you know, realistically speaking, if I were to start learning to produce today, it would still probably be like 5 to 7 years before I would even want to put something out, you know? Because it's like, you got to be good at that, not just put something out.
Well, these days you don't have to be good.
Well, I guess you didn't even necessarily back then either. That's true. That's true.
Sure, but also like, you know, talking to, or like speaking of people that you see and that you end up comparing yourself with, you like, then you find out, well, they actually didn't make that shit on their own. Like they had somebody else, but their name is, you know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's just I remember watching this Theo Parrish Red Bull lecture in 2005, the 2005 lecture, but I saw it in like 08, 09, maybe a year into DJing. And this is really kind of why I thought, oh, okay, I didn't even realize DJs approached DJing with the level of intellectuality that they did until I heard this Theo Parrish lecture. Because it was like all this theory that it was the way like you would hear filmmakers talk about their films in this language. And I was like, I remember being so just a sponge, just watching that over and over and over again. Every interview I could find of him, because, and not just him, many others, but he was the first one. And in that lecture, he talks about if you're going to be a DJ, just be a DJ. Like you don't got to produce. And I was like, great. I remember thinking that then. I'm like, great, because I don't want to produce, you know? I just want to DJ. And now I do feel like I should, but I want to do it my way, you know, and I want to approach it with the same level of curiosity I did DJing, not because like, oh shit, this has got to be like, you got to be playing at Glastonbury or else you're behind, you know, like it can't be that, because just the moment it's like, it's never going to happen at that, you know, like, so it's impossible not to have that be a thought, you know. And all things being equal, I would love to just DJ, but I feel like putting something out does reach more ears. You know, people have something to hear you when you're not DJing. And I remember DJ Center told me that, and I remember when he said that, that shit stuck in my head. It sticks in my head all the time, you know. But I also don't want to put some bullshit out to say like, yeah, I produce. You know, like I don't want it to be mediocre. I don't want to have anything mediocre.
Of course not. But, you know, we all start somewhere, I guess.
Totally.
No, but I also understand the part of like, you've worked so many years and you worked so hard to establish yourself as a DJ, then to be like, you don't want to put out what you might think is crap, right? Because for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many elements to it and to think about. But I know I wanted to ask you that because, like I said, there's not many DJs that really just play other people's records, right? I can think of Rich Medina. Even though he obviously produces music, but his primary focus, and Rich, if you see this, we could talk about it.
Shout out to Rich.
Yeah, shout out to Rich. Always.
Love that dude.
Is playing records, you know, playing music, and he says it himself. You know, it's like it's the 10,000 hours, and it's like a blue collar job. You work.
Absolutely. You got to get your hands dirty. You know, it's definitely something that you get good at by doing a lot, I think. And yeah, Rich is very much an inspiration for the way he approaches it. And even if like we might necessarily not play the same type, like I love Rich Medina for the way he plays, and when he decides to play when at any time he could cut tempos, and that is like a freedom that I think every DJ should aspire to reach, you know. Theo does that too. But yeah, I just think like I just know my own personality, and sometimes I'll play and I'll think I was not good, and I'll like be bummed about it for a day or two, and I don't want that thing to be like a song or a record I put out and it's like, oh well, you know, like 15 people like only bought it or whatever, which is great. 15 people buy my shit, it's incredible, you know. But you know, you have like different expectations, and you only hear the mistakes in your things, and yeah, I just gotta stop bullshitting. Just try it.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you. Where do I go here? Which direction do I go first? Let's continue in terms of like your, can I say approach? I'm not sure if that's the right term of DJing, but I wanted to ask you like what you played so many venues and places. Like, what is your favorite? Not your favorite. I shouldn't say use the word favorite. Something like a great party for you. You have your own party. You played other people's party. It's like, what does it look like, and where do you find those dance floors these days, if you find them?
You're asking like specific places, or just
not necessarily?
Okay.
Not necessarily. If you want to
just
mention
what
a place,
does it look like?
Yeah, what does it look like? What does it look like, and what does it feel like? Maybe so.
I think it really is like everyone that works there is just like all on the same page as a team working together. Like the bartenders aren't pissed, like the door guy isn't a dick, you know, like the managers aren't short with you. Everyone is just like warm and after the same thing. Obviously, you know, it's the nature of the job. You're going to be, you know, but I think my favorite places always have that, you know, like that you're being greeted warmly and like, you know, what do you need? How will we take care of you? And then the people that come in and dance, they come in with an open ear, and they're not really fussed on it needing to be one specific thing or another musically, which is great because it gives you the freedom to be able to go in whatever direction you want to go in. Those two ingredients plus a good sound system, you know, like, I mean, yeah, good sound system, 2 working turntables, you know. I know, we would assume, right? Yeah, like, but honestly, really like the sound system, how it's set up with the floors and the walls and everything sounding good, not just the sound system, but is it sounding good? Can people dance in there, And then, like, then it puts the pressure on you to like, all right, here we go. You talk your shit now. Like that I think is like my favorite places all have all that in common. And it doesn't really matter what city, because those places exist here. They exist in Montreal, I've seen in Detroit, in Miami. Shout out to Dante's. I feel like, you have it's possible. It's very much possible. I think all those ingredients, I think, is what's essential. And then also I think the DJ. I think we should at least understand that everyone is individually going through a lot of shit. And they're there, whether they're behind the bar backing, working door, dancing, like they're there, and in some way maybe they get a little something out. I'm not saying like through the actual job, but like you is playing the music, like that's the responsibility you carry in a way to like, along with yourself. Like I could be feeling a certain way coming in, and I'm like, man, I need this right now. I need to just throw this down. And I feel like that part, when everyone is kind of under that page, that's like the best night possible, I think,
Yeah, that's a very good explanation. Oh, sorry, I heard stuff upstairs.
Tables are moving upstairs.
Yeah. Let's talk about public service.
All right.
For a second. Caesar was on the podcast last year, I feel like, a while back. He explained how public service came about. You can tell your version also as well if you want to. And then I'll have a couple of follow-up questions. Like, also, I mean, by the time this comes out, the party has already been done, but you're playing tomorrow.
And nowadays?
Yeah. Together with Mefta and Dion. So yeah, tell me your... First of all, let's go back. How did you and Caesar meet? Obviously, two DJs in New York City. There's eventually the paths will cross. But I'm just like, in order then to actually feel like, oh, we kind of on the same page. Let's do a party together. How did that come about?
I worked, shout out to Black Flamingo. I played, rest in peace, Black Flamingo. I DJ'd every Wednesday at Black Flamingo the year they opened. We were the first weekly residents. Me and Jesse Mann, shout out to Jesse Mann. We did this party on Wednesdays called Banga Banga. It was basically a Afro, Latin, Brazilian dance night. No house, no disco, just music from the diaspora, right? That's what Bryce was kind of his motivation, whatever. And I remember we started doing it in April, and it was really great. And we thought, oh man, once the summer starts, it's gonna be lit, because and then the summer started, and it was like dead. So like Bryce is like, all right, we're gonna start doing it like every other week, and then it got to like monthly. And at a certain point, like the main manager, the general manager, switched out, and they had a new manager. And Bryce was gonna be there, and he's like, hey, this new manager's gonna be there. He'll help you with anything you need. And when we're there setting up or whatever, down walks Caesar, and he introduced himself, and is like big, tall dude, and he was like super nice, respectful, heard us play. I think we had a band too, and he was like, oh yeah, like I can't remember what the band was, but it was either something Brazilian or Latin. And at some point during the night, he had mentioned that he also played music. I know he was a DJ, because he said that, but I think he also used to play music. And I think he had also mentioned that the following week or 2 weeks later, he was going to do a Wednesday there. But he had this musician, Jeremy Bosch, come in to play like a salsa night. And I remember thinking in my head, I'm like, I hope it's not good in a way, So like, I think it was like the next Wednesday. So like the next Wednesday, he was super nice, everything. The next Wednesday, I come to Black Flamingo, and I go to eat dinner there. I'm at the bar, and I'm hearing Jeremy Bosch play his ass off. The band is dope, but I'm in there like, oh, hey, what's up? But at the same time, like, I hope this band's like not tight, and they're tight as fuck. Jeremy Bosch is a great musician. The musicians were all great. And that's when Caesar and I really started talking, because, I think that's when I found out he was Dominican, found out I was Cuban Ecuadorean. But where we really connected was through Florida, because I told him I grew up in Miami, and he was like, oh, I grew up in Tampa. I'm like, oh shit, I've been visiting St. Pete, Tampa since I was 6 years old, So once we started talking about the Cuban food in Tampa, it's like, we were like, oh man, we missed that shit. There's no good Cuban food here. that's how we really kind of connected. And then we were also very tight with mutual friends, another couple mutual friends, Peter Mattson and Jared Cohen. And the five of us, I think, like, and Jesse Mann, the five of us all played together a couple times. And I think from those playing together, Caesar and I became cool. But really, it was over him working Thursday nights at Black Flamingo till late, till like 4 or 5 in the morning. And I would come in maybe after a gig, maybe sometimes no gig, but I would just kick it with him and Maria, who'd be bartending. And we would wind up talking about like all kinds of like DJ life BS, you know, to all kind, like why reggaeton is why. I mean, I had a very anti-reggaeton stance like in those days. It's softened now, but then it was like just from a pop music perspective, you know, not cultural. But I remember we would argue, not argue, but just like kind of like deliberate and have this conversation without necessarily being like we're arguing about something, you know, just kind of coming to an understanding, you know. And it was through that we kind of shared, had shared frustrations, shared kind of goals, but the way we played were very different. So we never, I don't know, like at least initially I thought like he was dope as hell. And I remember hearing like, damn, I love how he's able to incorporate playing bass music with house music. And it's like, I didn't know you could do that. But it's like, of course you could do that. But it's like when someone does it, it's like, of course they could. But I'm like, but until they do it, you know, it's like, it was really fresh the way it was like playing house music in a way that no one else was playing in New York. And I really, you know, I'm someone that if I like the way you play, like I'll tell you, you know, like I really like how you did this and this and this, you know. And I think from that, we really started kind of talking over like each other's DJ sets and music and what we kind of saw for the city, what we felt the city was missing. And from that, I think was like around maybe 2019, we kind of were like, you know, we should do something together. We didn't know what it was yet, you know, but around that time, we're like, we should do something together and maybe it be something like a nighttime maybe thing. And then as 2020 happened and we were, or just even leading into 2010, we were kind of, it'd be cool to do something maybe outdoors, summertime, you know? And so it was like maybe we were friends like 4 years before we really like decided to do a party together. And yeah, that's essentially how like the first conversations about like nothing like, you know, call about public service or anything, just like doing something together that is able to be something really intentional and genuine and something that feels like something you would want to come to if you were visiting New York, you know, or new to New York, you know. And as it just so happened in 2021, coming out of the pandemic, Felipe Mendez, shout out to Felipe, he hit me up. He owns Mi La Grossa, and beautiful place, one of my favorite places to play. He hit me up about this idea he had to do a block party in front of his restaurant. And because they had the Brooklyn Open Streets thing, the block was closed. So he thought that we didn't need permits. So he's like, I want to do a block party every Sunday and I want you to play with me and I want you to book the whole thing. So I was like, oh shit, incredible. You know, I was like, yes, incredible. I'm like, all right, my first decision, we're going to make Caesar our third resident. First decision. And it was a very good decision in my opinion, because not to pat myself on the back, but Felipe's Mexican and presents music in a particular way from where he comes from. And I know that he chose me because of where I come from and kind of how I presented it. And I thought that Caesar presented music from a third perspective that I felt was very much New York, but very much of the diaspora as well. And I think like Felipe was down and we put the first one all together and it came together that way. It was just so special, especially like I think a week or two after things were open again for the first time, you know? And it was unbelievable. I had never been involved in a party of that many people coming. Every party I've ever thrown prior to that was 10 people, 5 people. You know, they're poorly attended parties, you know, especially the first couple times. But this was like incredible off the bat. But unfortunately, by the second time, the police came and was like, you need to get permits. So when we did the third one, they were there from the beginning and were like, we're going to shut you down early. And then this whole like permit dance happened where they were like, just get the permits, but they would never give it to us. So we were stuck in this like limbo of like, all right, we have this thing that's special, but you know, nowhere to do it. And Caesar and I going into 2022 felt like we were so close, you know, not just Caesar and I, but Felipe, with all due respect, you know, his businesses are his, you know, main profession, not DJing, you know? And we recognized that very much in the early beginning. It was a conversation all of us had. Like, whereas with Caesar and I, this is our profession. So we, you know, wanted to continue it, even if it wasn't going to be on a block party with Baila and Felipe, you know? We tried to do it, but things didn't quite materialize the way we thought it would. So Caesar and I were like, all right, plan B. Let's just do this together, and we'll pool all our resources together, whatever we got, our turntables, our CDJs, our mixer, whoever's got the better mixer between us, our speakers. And we did it at Von King. It was just like, you know, it wasn't that difficult to get the permits, you know, just go to the Parks Department, get the permit, then got to get the permit from the precinct. And we pulled it together. We did the first one. It was kind of a hot mess, but it was beautiful because, you know, it had all the kind of classic first party, you know, mistakes or, you know, things that'll happen in first party. Like we couldn't get the power on, so we'd play like half a record and everything will cut. And this was supposed to start at 2 and it was like 4:30. And at a certain point, like we're like, fuck it, we can't use this sound. Like our homie Omer actually was gonna lend us his sound, and he couldn't quite figure out how much power we needed to get in our generators. So it was like shorting. So I had to go home and get like my 2 speakers and put them on sticks. And we played the first public service like that, you know? And people, when we played the first song, I played Brenda Taylor, You Can't Have Your Cake and Eat It Too. And when I played that, people started applauding like it was The Loft. It was awesome and also a little embarrassing, but also like, man, we did that. You know, it was beautiful to see, because it's like, all right, it can't get any worse than that, you know? And I think like after that point, I was like, we gotta
have to have those experiences in
definitely.
order to, you know, go to where you guys are now, and like
Definitely.
are going to go.
Definitely. Yeah, no, like after that, I think we reached out to Carl, and Carl was like available, but he couldn't do like the whole summer. So from that point on, it's just been a beautiful thing to work on with Caesar, because he's someone that he's a great person on so many levels, but really he's like the best kind of friend that you can ask for, because he's the kind of person to give you criticism, but not make you feel like it's, motherfucker, get your shit, and you know, like tell it to you in a way like, all right, you know, or like, you know, it's like you got to have those conversations back and forth and not feel like your ego is getting hurt because of it. You know, it's like all you're trying to do is just like trying to make something great, you know? And I think that's like the magic, is trying to do something with people that you believe in, you know, and whose work that they've done that you believe in, you know? I think that's really that, and a little luck, quite honestly. You know, you always need a little luck, but I think that's how it all came together.
So now I feel like obviously you've done 2 times also in Detroit. Obviously, like I said, with Mefta and Dion. Also outside, both were beautiful. One was in the rain, one was in the sun. And then
So
beautiful. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was it last year already that you've done like a smaller, maybe? I want to say like you DJ'd at a venue as public service, right? I think it was Nowadays, and then even in DC, I want to say. And then, like I said, tomorrow you're gonna do public service at Nowadays inside again. And I remember talking to Caesar as well about public service, and he spoke about, you know, the whole aspect of it being outside, of it being multi-generational. Everybody can come. It's open, accessible to everybody. And the park being one thing that is accessible to all New Yorkers, so everybody can come. So I wonder what the conversations maybe were or are, right? I think it's an ongoing conversation between you guys of taking something then into a venue where you have restrictions, not just space, but also obviously there might be a cover charge and all the things that you don't have on the outside. And public service being, again, the intention was to be accessible to everybody. How do you guys, I guess, what's the conversation between y'all to be like, okay, we still have the free version, not the free version, the actual public service outside.
Right.
But then we also do want to or have to maybe play inside that is, you know, like maybe more similar to like a club gig per se. Maybe I'm just trying to understand the thought process of like okay, we can do different versions of public service.
Yeah, I think with the free thing, every place that we've done this in New York has been very receptive to us doing like a free with RSVP for like the first couple hours, and like a sizable amount of people, not like 10 people or whatever, you know? And I think that's something that we try to, you know, when we're in those conversations, is something that we definitely want. It would be difficult to call something public service and to just have something covered from the whole time, you know? Obviously, you know, we do a free party from like May to September. So, you know, there is that, but that's one thing. And I think like when you're in a business, it is, you know, the rules of the business to a degree. But I think it's also you dealing with that business is what you're able to maintain the spirit or somewhat of, you know, what you do. But you're right. I mean, it isn't the same in the sense that it's not an open park, you know, and it's not all ages and random people aren't coming in from anywhere. You don't know who it is. Everyone that's there is there because they know what's happening. I think with us, it's like we try to do that, try to have that free with RSVP option available. And in the music sense, try to give the same kind of vibe, you know, from beginning to end. You know, even though we're playing like a club, doesn't mean like we start at 10 and it's like 1:25, you know? Like we could still start off and warm up the way we warm up at Von King, you know? And that's cool. I feel like, you know, they don't pressure. We don't get pressure for that. You know, I think that if there was some kind of like sonic kind of change on some like, hey, we need you to pick it up, that kind of thing, that would be very weird. But, you know, I think as long as we can have that option for people, for a sizable portion of our group. For example, last year we did Xanadu, right? And we didn't do a free thing, you know, and people, it was pretty well attended, you know, like I think like 200 or so people came, but, you know, it was like pretty expensive cover that I think it was maybe $20, you know, that's not nothing, you know, that's dinner or lunch, you know, could be electricity bill, you know, like it's not nothing. And I think that free option, it goes a long way. Also, like, you know, I understand like sometimes, you know, you want to try and, I think with us is like we try to be faithful to the people that really supportive of public service. So if they're not in some way going to be able to get in free through, you know, the regular means, we'll accommodate them, you know. But yeah, I think when this thing with Xanadu kind of happened, it was cool. I enjoyed it, and they took care of us, and it was great. But I think that one little detail, I think kind of it led to something missing in a sense, you know, even though it was a great time and everything. It was beautiful. We were set up in the middle there. But yeah, I think I'm grateful that nowadays is open and having us do it. When Justin reached out to us to do it in July, he very much was sensitive to how, you know, we do public service at the parks, and was very accommodating and making like a RSVP link specifically for the, you know, RSVP for free. But they had to be in by this particular time, which makes sense. That's a good compromise in my opinion. You know, like it can't be for that. We should just open a club and call it public service and just have it free the whole time, you know, But until we get there, I think also this is a good thing in the winter to do because we miss it, you know?
That's a good point. Yeah.
So, you know, I miss playing with Caesar. You know, I don't want to speak for him, but I feel like he might miss playing with me. And then there's like, you know, the whole doing it together with people and seeing, you know, the whole fam together again part, you know, it's like, do we really got to wait till May or April, you know?
That's another good point. Yeah. Okay. I see where this is going.
Sometimes it's just like, you know,
it's just simple sometimes.
Yeah. But it is true. It's like nothing, you know, it's really tough to replicate an experience you have at a park to a club. You know, and I think with any DJs, you know, like the best parties, there's something that's kind of, it's not quite the same. It's not whack. It's just not quite the same.
It's just different.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm very excited for nowadays. It's my first time playing in there since like 2018, I think, like right when they opened. And this is going to be, I think, a pretty busy thing because that time before was not. It was a very lowly attended night, but you know, I think it's important to play those like dead nights. You learn a lot about yourself as a DJ playing those nights.
Bro,
you know?
who did I talk to? Maybe it was Terry. I can't remember. I feel like I have this conversation with myself so many times and I can't remember who I talked to. Because I'd be like, at some point something's got to give, because the hours I put into empty floors or like, you know, like fully attended parties, like as you say, it's just like, yeah, this I can't. I have to do this. I just keep telling myself, you know, like, you know, I'm practicing.
Yeah, I mean, there's different things, you know, like everyone wants like a full house, you know, but when you have like 10% of a full house, you got to work that 10%, and that's a skill, working that 10%. It's not the same music as if it's like a packed house, you know?
Yeah.
You could maybe build it, maybe people start coming in, but that's the thing is like sometimes I used to play every Sunday at Bembe for 6 years, and that I learned a lot as a DJ there, because it would be dead for like 2 hours, and you had to play with this like, it doesn't matter, people are gonna come in, and sure enough, five people before you know it, the whole place is packed after you're there for like 2 hours contemplating everything, you know? And you have to be mentally like ready too. So like, cause you could play like, you think you got a packed house, and then you could playing a half hour, and you change a tempo or do something that might throw off their rhythm, and their attention span, the dancer at Bembe's, their attention span would kind of, generally speaking, they would be like, fuck it, let's go somewhere else, and would leave, you know? So you would have like a pack pace, and it would die on you right there in a matter of like 3 or 4 songs. You're like, what happened? I thought it was packed, you know? And I think you learn a lot about like, all right, what I got right now isn't gonna be here for 3 hours, so I gotta work all these records, you know, until I know I got them, you know? And the same thing with those like 4 or 5 people. It's like those 4 or 5 people, you never know. Like, they might be having a wedding. They might have a birthday party. They might be opening a new spot. And they might just be someone that might be supportive of your music and where you play for the rest of your career. But that's the first night they heard you, you know? Like, I feel like all those things they build the DJ. They build you as a DJ. And I think that it just allows, when the moment comes in, it is a packed house, you're like, all right, I played in front of every type of crowd possible, you know? And I think it's cool. Like, I still get nervous when I play like gigs that I'm really looking forward to. So like tomorrow, I'll definitely have some butterflies in there, but it's good. I like that, you know? I like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you don't feel anything, if you just like business as usual in a profession like that, I think it's, I don't know if it's dangerous, but I'm like, how could that? I'm always questioning like, how could that be? Because it's you're an emotional being, and you're playing music that affects people. You playing to other human beings, so it's not just like, oh, I'm gonna go work on this machine right here for the next 2 hours. Like, it's something that is just like a breathable entity that just can change within seconds.
Absolutely.
Like you said,
it's a back and forth thing. We're talking, you know, but I'm talking to you through other people's music, and sometimes it could be a slip up of me picking up the needle on the record that's playing. That happened to me last week.
Show of hands.
So embarrassing. And it was like with real house music. It was actually here that it happened. It was upstairs. It happened. I could not believe it. But yeah, that kind of thing. But you know, sometimes they'll go along. They'll be like, oh, and then you put the record again, and they're like, you know. Sometimes they'll clear out like, oh, this guy's trash. You know, understand. You got to be ready to roll with both. You know. But I feel like the nerves thing is just something that is, at least in my personality, is just something that is a good sign, because it means like, all right, I'm thinking about this. You know, I'm like, not thinking necessarily what records to play when, but just, you know.
I remember that reminds me of like when I went to school, and I like, you know, studying for tests or some shit, or you had to do a test, and I knew exactly like if I didn't study and I was just like, I'm gonna be fine, trash, I failed. But if I studied a little bit and I didn't know everything, but I, you know, I'm sure like I know enough, that's when the butterflies came. I'm like, I don't know, do I know this, do I know that? I feel like it's the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, because sometimes it's like, all right, you wanted to play here, you're playing here. All right, now don't be complaining when you're not playing here. You got to actually produce, you know, like you got to do well. Yeah, I kind of like that. What I like about, I think one of the things I took most to DJing was like that competitive part of, you can actually kind of will yourself to a degree to play, like you can will a crowd, you know, you can kind of will a crowd to, but you got to be like in touch with them, and it's got to be, the time has to be put in that night, you know. I don't think it's something from the first song, but that's to me the best part, that if you are doing your thing, everything right, and it's all kind of coming together, you can kind of shift to a degree, you know, like people's energy into like a place where like, we were thinking about leaving, but then you started playing, you know, like that kind of thing, you know? Yeah, I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours.
No. But you are working DJ and you have to go somewhere. So
I do, that's right. I got 2 gigs. Money gigs, but you know, thankful for them.
We all have to take those, don't we?
Absolutely.
At some point.
Absolutely.
You know? Speaking of, you know, the way you just perfectly described all the dance floor moments, what are some of your, I always ask for 3 tracks that you like to play for dancers?
Man.
Or like to shimmy to yourself?
There has been the Stefan Ringer record that I was playing a lot over the summer. I'm blanking on it. He did the record with Ben Hickson, the 2x2.
I know exactly which one you're talking about. Pretty Little Thing. I think that's Piggly. What it's called.
Piggly. That one. Pretty Little Girl Like You. That's it. That one I was really, really, really playing a lot. I really, really like mixing that record in because it's got this kind of like Cuban clave to it, but it's a house song, but it's got this Cuban clave. So for me, like it gives all this freedom to be able to play something before it, knowing that I can come on with something that's going to sound quote unquote Afro-Cuban or whatever, or African or Brazilian, but this next record will sound like that too until, you know, like the kickstart. And yeah, I've really been loving that record. This record by Morgan Greenstreet, Mo Drums, he put out called La Rumba Compa. It's a rumba from the Congo mixed with a compa from Haiti. And I've been playing that a lot. I hope to be putting that out next year. This is unnecessary, shameless plug. But that record I love a lot because it's got all these different ingredients that I feel like really work.
Back up real quick. What do you mean you putting it out?
I'm actually starting a label.
Okay, so let's go back to the tracks and we're gonna come back to that one. You're throwing the shit out like very little by little.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Okay, we have track number 2, one more, and then we can dig into the label.
Okay. Let's see. Sometimes with music, a lot of times I don't know like pop versions of things when I hear it. You know, like I might get a song like, oh, I love this. And then find out after I've been playing it, like, oh, you know that this was actually in this or whatever. So there's a song by Black Coffee called Superman that I've been playing recently that I did not know that Drake was in it for like, I did not know Drake was in it at all until my girlfriend pointed it out. And I was like, holy shit.
So, wait, she knows only the Drake version?
Well,
but Black Coffee was first.
Black Coffee was first, yes.
20 years ago, that song came out.
Right. But apparently, like, Drake sampled it when he did that house record a couple years ago or whatever. And I didn't know because I was just like, I don't listen to that, you know? So I'm like, a couple people like had mentioned that it was Drake. I'm like, why do they mention Drake? And then she mentioned to me that, oh yeah, because he did a version. I'm like, wait, what? And then she showed me the song, and it was pretty much the same thing, just with him. But yeah, that song I really been enjoying playing recently.
It's funny that you say that because it's again that there was a time, I don't know if you've been playing that song since it came out, like many moons ago, right? And when I remember when the song came out, and you know everybody, this is a nice song, and then it came to a point, I want to say like late 2000s. Again, my years might be completely off, where from a dancer's perspective, right, like if you're in a club and you just dance, you're just like, you're so over the song, like yeah. Oh my god, we're all just gonna play Superman all night long, like come on, and everybody's over it. And it's then obviously then the Drake thing happened, and I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And many people didn't know that Black Coffee made this, and it was it's such a better song, but whatever.
Way better.
And then I had like whatever mixed feeling, like, you know, the song is like, it's a cool song, but you don't want to play it or listen to it because you just heard it so many times.
Right.
And then until Donis actually played it at Nowadays early in the night. Maybe it was the last year. I don't remember. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't heard this song in so long. And that he played that song, and that set me off into dancing that whole party. And I was just like, no, songs can live forever. You just have to play it for the right person at the right time.
Absolutely.
And then to your point, what you just said, I played it yesterday because I found the record somewhere, and I'm playing it, and I'm like, do these people know the song? Do they think now I'm playing something else because they don't know Drake's song? Like, I was so confused, but I just enjoyed myself just knowing the song. So yeah, I'm sorry, that was long-winded, but you set something off.
That's interesting though, because there is something to like a DJ. For example, like I didn't know that record was 20 years old when I pulled it and listened to it. I just saw the logo, and I remember I got it at Cosmic Arts. I remember I asked like, what's this logo? And it's like Black Coffee. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I listened to it, I'm like, all right, this is good. I'm going to play this. I'm going to work this in. And because it's like 2025, I'm discovering this. So like, sometimes there's something to a DJ discovering something that even though it's a classic, he's going to be putting it in such a way that to them is fresh. And because it's presented fresh, you hear it fresh. And I wonder if that's what Donis did that. You know,
I don't know. I'm sure he knew of the record. You know, I'm sure. I don't know, actually. We're going to ask him. It's an interesting story, but I'm just like, I was so surprised at myself. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know what was happening. I mean, I know the song. I'm like, oh, okay,
and
cool.
That's a beautiful record.
It's a beautiful song.
It's a beautiful song. I love that song. But yeah, that's one I've been playing recently. So I probably will play it tomorrow. Not sure when.
I'll be there. You know, dancing shoes on. Now let's talk about this before we get kicked out here. Talk about this label situation that I don't know if you wanted to mention this or
no, it's
if
cool.
it's just like,
It's now and now I got to do this because I'm putting it out into the
last words.
I know.
In this important interview.
Well, yeah, it was like we were talking about producing and all this stuff, you know, and there was a part of me that did feel like Theo Perez, you know, he's like a mentor, even though I don't know him. But he mentioned also, he's like, it's natural for a DJ's progression to want to eventually get into producing. And it's natural for producer's progression to eventually want to become a musician. And that hit me deep because I was already I didn't want to be pushed into it because like, oh, I got to do it. But I was starting to hear certain songs, certain things. I'm like, ooh, I can extend this. And I think this will be cool like this. I haven't done it yet. But like, I feel like if I could do this, and I'm starting to get ideas with songs. And I think that part of it is why I'm like, oh, maybe I'll start doing edits, you know? So with the label, the idea was to start the label to have my own medium to put it out, I guess. But with this first record, it's going to be not me. It's going to be Mo Drums, who I was saying is going to be putting out, we're going to be putting out 12-inch, hopefully within the first like 3 or 4 months of the year, I'm hoping, 2026. But yeah, it's like, the label is called BeBop Porú. It's the same, it's like my radio show, and BeBop Porú, for those who might not know, it's like it's a play on words on what Vicks Vapor Rub is. Vicks Vapor Rub, pronounced by Latin people who don't know English, they swallow the V's, so they say them like B's, so it comes off like BeBop Porú instead of Vicks Vaporú, you know? So I basically created BeBop Porú from that. But why I chose bebop was because bebop was the era in jazz music, was the first era really in music in this continent, this whole hemisphere, where you had someone from the Caribbean playing music with someone from the United States, like a Black American jazz musician playing music with Afro-Cubans. That happened in the bebop era. And from that, you had Cubop, you know, and everything, and later salsa, you know, but before that mambo and all this stuff. But that was the first fusion of Caribbean music, Afro-Caribbean music with Black American music, you know? And it wasn't cats here trying to do jazz. It's like, if you listen to like Mario Basad, him and Machito were the first two Afro-Cubans to start this genre of Afro-Cuban jazz. They talk about how they had to learn not just how to play jazz, they had to learn how to play jazz like the black man played jazz, you know? So they were taught the real way by them and I think from that fusion, I feel like it made perfect sense to use bebop for this name on top of the BeBop Porú, which is just a funny thing that Latin people, you know? So that's the label. Yeah. I'm starting it, long-winded way of saying that it's going to be something I'm going to start hopefully within the next like 3 or 4 months with that first release. That's going to be like a compa from Haiti fused with a rumba from the Congo. Another song is going to be a bomba from Puerto Rico that he did with Victor Pablos, I want to say. And there's a couple other joints on there too. It's just a 12-inch, you know, got to start small, got to start humble.
Hey, listen, we're starting.
We're starting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, let's put the record out first and then, but thank you.
Well,
thank you. I appreciate it.
Congratulations. Yeah. Any other last words?
No, thank you for having me. I'm super grateful.
Thank you for
the
being
invite. Shout out to Terry for letting us do this here. And no, I'm just grateful to be in a community, in a space like this in New York City and Brooklyn, where if you would have told me, you know, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that I would, you know, be in New York doing this, I would be like, you're crazy, you know? So this is awesome, like for like 16, 17-year-old me to like kind of look back and be like, wow, you know? So if I say all that to say, like, anyone can do this and kind of pick this up and find their own voice with it and take it places and see parts of the world. You just got to kind of believe in yourself, you know, even though you might have doubt. I feel like that's the most important thing, but that's what I'll leave it with. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you again for sharing your story. Shout out to Terry, and thank you to the Rap Music Cafe for giving us the space to do this here. Again, like, comment, and subscribe. You know, do all the YouTube and all the podcast things you have to do to help a girl out. Thank you, and thank you again.
My pleasure.
See you
Thank
in
you
the
so
next
much.
one. Bye.